Hi, I'm Ulrich von Tolstat.
And I'm Malcolm McLeod.
And I'm Vali Ulferson.
And I'm Casimir Dragovic.
And I'm Aki Nomuro Naga.
We're coming to you from the Shire of Arden Road. Welcome to Von Tolstat Fight Club.
Welcome back to Von Tolstat Fight Club. In this video series, we examine techniques based on principles found in the late 16th and early 17th century Italian rapier fencing, with an emphasis on Fabris, the Vienna Anonymous, and practical fight experience. In today's episode, we will examine how to effectively parry thrusts to the high inside and outside lines. In order to parry a thrust on the high inside line, let's remember that the high inside line is on the left side of your sword above your arm if you're right-handed. It's reversed if you're standing in a left-handed guard. Many times when new fighters are taught to parry an attack, they are told that their guard and forte need to rotate into quarta and move laterally to the left, while the point is still aimed toward the opponent's center line. The theory behind this motion is that your point is still threatening your opponent while your strong intercepts their weak to guide the point away from your body. But there's a big problem with parrying this way. It doesn't actually close the line against a thrust. Watch as my opponent still strikes me through the parry attempt. The reason this parry fails is because my point is still aimed at my opponent, and they can easily pass through it with their own forte. It is not enough that my forte moves horizontally to the side. A better parry looks like this. Because my point is now crossing over the top of my opponent's blade with my forte on a weaker portion of his blade, the line is fully closed and the parry works. If you've been having trouble getting your parries to stick, this is probably the reason. Let's examine what's happening. My opponent takes a guard on my inside line, and I set up so that my forte is situated in a way that if he were to attack me in that straight line, his double A would have to pass near my forte. I am in a guard between terza and quarta. Notice my arm is not bent all the way, nor is it fully locked out in extension. It is more extended than not though. As my opponent begins his attack, I aim my point up and cross it over the top of his blade. Notice that my point is not aimed at my opponent's body, but rather more over his shoulder on the sword arm. The strong part of my blade is rested against the mid portion of my opponent's blade. This gives me the mechanical advantage I need to push his attack aside. I am not just pressing directly sideways though. I'm more giving an angled forward diagonal pressure towards the direction of my point. Notice my arm is still mostly extended and I'm not bending my arm across my body. Now let's look at a high outside line parry. On the high outside line, I will take the extended quarta guard, or terza, and set up similarly to our first example with my arm more extended than not. As my opponent attacks, I aim my point up and over their blade, this time in quarta. I am sure to get my forte and hilt into my opponent's blade as my false edge takes it offline. Again, I am using a forward diagonal pressure. I can also use terza to parry the high outside line, aiming my point up and over my opponent's blade as they thrust on that line. Preparing the thrust in seconda on the high outside line is not ideal because your point will naturally want to drift away from your opponent's sword instead of up and over it. For this reason, it is actually weaker than terza or quarta on this line. I can modify my grip so that it's easier to get my point over my opponent's weapon in seconda, but due to body mechanics, my opponent can more easily resist my parry in seconda, as pressing on my blade naturally pulls the sword out of my hand, as we previously discussed in episode 5. By contrast, using the extended quarta is great because the point can easily cross over the opponent's sword, and if they give pressure, the sword presses more into my hand instead of out of it. Seconda is simply not as suited to parry thrusts on the outside line as terza and quarta, but it does have plenty of other uses that we'll dive into in the future. To practice your parries, get a partner to throw slow, controlled attacks at you. Concentrate on extending the arm and getting your forte against their déboulé and mid-blade area. And lift your point up and cross it over the top of your opponent's weapon. Once you get comfortable, have your partner mix it up by throwing in a disengage to thrust, moving your blade from a different line to catch their blade in a parry, or other variations so that you can get comfortable with parrying more than just a straight attack. The big key is that to fully parry the thrust, you want that point crossing over the top of the opponent's blade with your forte in the right position. As you practice, you will get a feel for how much pressure to give and how far offline your point needs to go to shut them out. Fabris says that every parry should be followed up with an attack, which can be done in 2 major actions, the parry and then the follow-up attack. Even better is to thrust your opponent in opposition in the same time as their attack, catching them in the middle of their tempo. We will cover these techniques in future episodes. In the meantime, work your parries every chance you get. Once you get comfortable with your defense, you'll find that doors will begin to open for you. Until we meet again, thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time on Von Tolstat Fight Club.